Ah, good. Okay. Okay, so apologies if I'm kind of not quite with it. I've had hardly any sleep. It's been seed camp over the last few days. How many people are looking at or actually already are deving for iPhone in particular, but also some of the other mobile platforms? Yeah, good. You should be. It's good. And how many people are investors looking at investing in this sort of thing? Right, so the guys who just put their hands up at the start, find those investors and cover their ears. I appreciate the irony of what I've just said, but you'll see why in a minute. So, you don't have the same font I do. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Okay, so the aim of this, when I spoke to Kieran and Neil just before we came in, and we were talking about ways of presenting this in a really nice way. I'm going to put myself on a timer so I don't go too long. Just give me a sec. And I was telling Kieran, yeah, my presentation is really optimistic. It goes optimistic, pessimistic, optimistic. I've actually realized that it ends with pessimistic, so I'll try and be optimistic. And it's designed to saturate you with loads of information, assuming the font actually allows it to be shown. So here goes. This talk is actually mostly about Apple. Other app stores may be available. Sorry to Microsoft, who are here, and Google, who I'm not too sure of here. Everything that I'm going to say that's true of Apple is going to be true of these other things as well. Just Apple has a hell of a lot more stats, which makes this thing more meaty. Does it move? That's better. Okay, to give you an idea why I'm focusing on Apple as well, the App Store is really huge. In the last 300 days, Apple have gone from 0 to 1 billion downloads. Not all of those are paid. This is the stat saturation bar. So 30 million iPhone operating system devices sold, by which I mean the touch and the iPhone, 35,000 apps, 1 million iPhones in the UK, 360 million per year generated for Apple, and that was relatively old stats, so really doing quite well. 3.4 million iPhones being sold per quarter. And if you're an independent developer and you're developing some fun little application, check out how rich you can be. Trism generated over 500,000, iShoot over 800, iFart, I really don't know. They kind of haven't given away their stats, but it's a lot more than 250,000. Koi Pond, again, individual developer, I'm guessing about 600K. That's actually the slide that should terrify you. And I'll hopefully explain why in a bit, so it's not so good. So are you going to get rich? Probably not exactly. We'll see. And this is a bit where you cover investors' ears. So there are some really big challenges in the App Store, and I know people find these same challenges with the others. First of all, it's the coding stuff. Second of all, it's multiple platforms. Yes, the iPhone does have multiple platforms, and if you don't know that, you'll get completely nailed. Apple themselves, they're your best friends and also your worst enemy. How people find your apps, pirates are. And monetization. Despite the fact just showing you that people make a killing, they're actually a lot more difficult to monetize than you might first appreciate. A little bit of a background. If you're going to suddenly, you've got to release your iPhone app tomorrow, right, or yesterday more likely, the reality is it takes a little bit of time. Objective-C, if you don't know it already, is a relatively difficult language. It's somewhat more brutal than HTML. So you leave a colon off in Objective-C and it won't compile. Leave a colon off in HTML, in HTML, and then you might perhaps get something going wrong with IE5 or something. It takes about 5 times more code to do an iPhone app than a web app. It takes 30 seconds to compile and launch, so no Firebug for you. Projects take about 5 times longer than web apps. Having said that, Fire apps take less than a day. So. If you're really in a panic, it's too late. The initial approval process to have Apple say we're okay to develop for them was 2 weeks. Submitting the first app took 2 days. I spent £60 on a telephone call to IRS for about an hour dealing with all kind of the money side of things of American tax system. And submitting apps now that we've got it nailed takes a couple of hours. Again, if you're panicking, bear in mind the SDK is over a gig, which takes a little bit of time over ADSL. Okay, the legendary Apple approval process. I'm not going to say anything bad about Apple because without them, I wouldn't have a startup. So I would say that they're overworked. So appreciate the fact that they're growing really rapidly. The impression, obey the rules, don't do anything really crazy that would make the app not work or doesn't fit with Apple's ethos. If you want to get a rough idea of how it's working out, generally speaking, new apps take about a week to approve. Actually, I reckon their internal metric is 5 days. I reckon they've got a big counter at the top saying, you know, next app due in 5 days or something like this. If it takes more than that, you've probably failed. So don't kind of think it's going to take 2 months. If it takes 2 months, you're really in trouble. The revision is quite interesting. If you submit a revision, it can take 2 weeks. They've already approved version 1.0, and 1.1 takes 2 weeks. I don't know. Don't bother asking why. Apple will tell you why it failed. Don't argue. You'll never get a response unless you're pretty big or you're really, really good at begging. Just resubmit it. I don't know if they check the MD5 sum, but we usually add like a space in some of the letters somewhere, and that's good enough. This is a graph you can pick out later. It's not really clear, and it's not really meant to be. The point is that what I just said is actually really variable. Some apps are granted really quickly. Note the iPhone operating system isn't a single platform. Find yourself a first-generation iPod Touch and try and play a modern game on it. It almost certainly won't run. There's RAM issues, and there's graphics card issues, and a whole bunch of other things. And that's kind of the split. It's actually not just one operating system either. There are many, and this would be true of any other phone, of course, except maybe the Palm one. But the other thing is, assuming you do get in, you're probably not going to be found. So this is interesting. Your bigger competitors know this. Here's some stats from O'Reilly. So open your brains a bit, because there's some more stats being pumped in. That's the growth, 35,000 apps. That's kind of still pretty much hockey curve-ish. 1,000 new apps weekly. That bit at the top is about 1,500. And if you want to develop a game, then it's worth bearing in mind that 22% of the apps sold are games. So really, you're competing against 10,000 other apps, right? So it's going to be quite difficult to get found. On average, this doesn't apply to a lot of things, but on average, 50% of the purchases come through people just finding it serendipitously through the App Store, and the other 50% come from people advertising. There's a load of tricks you can play here. You can keep forcing updates into the system, so take yours from a 1.1 to a 1.2, 1.3. That works. However, your competitors are doing this, particularly big competitors. For us, our big competitors, iFitness. They are doing it relentlessly, all the time. They're on version 8.1. They do it every few days, which is cheating, but you know, it's part of the way it works, it's like SEO. Okay, how critical is all this discovery stuff? This is getting a bit grim by this point, by the way. So it's really, really mega important. If you get in the top 100, you get 2.3 downloads. If you get in the top 25, it's generally about 6 times more downloads. Sometimes you can get 10 times more downloads, especially if you're a game. Outside of that, if you're just relying on discovery alone, and this is based on an experiment we did recently, unless it's free, you generally get 5 to 10 downloads a day, and free ones tend to pick up about 200. Yeah, only there's that. So if you want to be in the top 25, this data came over the Christmas period, you'd have to get 20,000 downloads a day, which if you are, you're probably not that worried by that point. Pirates are a big threat. We found when our initial app was released, our app doesn't necessarily entirely rely on app sales, not at this stage anyway. About 80% of our very first spike of installs was pirates. It now works out to be about 50%, but we're kind of playing a different game. But this kills tiny startups. You think, oh my God, I've got 10,000 installs, that's 10,000 quid. And you get your balance at the end of the week, and it's £2,000. You go, all right, how am I going to pay myself to eat? It's kind of not so good. So you don't trust it until you get the money.